Back to Scott Swing Sports City, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back here by myself again today. My dad's at work. He'll be back in a few weeks once we start getting into the college football and NFL predictions. I told my one of my bosses yesterday, Phil Diaz, that I will be doing the Jets and Giants today. So let's get into those predictions right now. First up, my buddy Jeremy's Jets. First game of the season on the road at Carolina. I think that's a loss. I think Sam Darnold's going to want revenge uh, for the Jets trading him out of town in the offseason. So I'm going to go with the Panthers to get the win at home to start off 1-0 and start the Jets off 0-1 to start the season. Next up on the road at New England. No, at home against the Patriots. That's another loss. I think Bill Belichick's going to want to bounce back after a bad season last year. I think the Pats are going to have a much better season than they did last year, so I'm going to take the Patriots over the Jets. Next up, Week 3 at Denver. I think this is your first win of the season. I think Zach Wilson's going to play just well enough this week to get him a win. I think that the Broncos are going to be one of the bottom teams in the NFL this year. So I'm going to take the Jets to get a win over the Broncos. Next up at home against the Titans, that's a loss. I think the Tennessee Titans are a very good team coming into the season. In my opinion, they can make the playoffs depending on what happens with Carson Wentz and the Colts, who I saw in the news yesterday is expected to be ready for Week 1 of the season. So we'll see what happens with that. Next up on the road at Atlanta, that's another loss. I think the Falcons are a better team slightly, but if this game was at home, I would have taken the Jets. Oh, this game's actually in London. I'm going to take the Jets. I think the Jets will find a way to get a win here. I think the Jets are a good team. They have what it takes to get a win over the Falcons in London. Should be a nice 9:30 a.m. kickoff. So I'm going to take the Jets to get a close win in London against the Falcons. Next up on the road at New England. That's another loss. I think the Patriots have not lost to the Jets at Gillette in a long time. I don't think that happens this year. So I'm going to take the Patriots at home against the Jets. Next up at home against Cincinnati. Depending on who the quarterback is at this point in the season. But in my opinion, I think Joe Burrow will be hurt again at this point in the season because that offensive line can't protect him. So I'm going to take the Jets to get a home win over the Bengals. Next up on the road at Indy, that's a loss. I think Carson Wentz will be definitely back by Week 13, Week 9 of the season, and he'll be playing out of his mind at that point in the season. So I'm going to take the Colts over the Jets. Next up at home against the Bills, that's a loss. I think the Bills are going to be a very good team this year. My sleeper team to make the Super Bowl this year in the AFC, in my opinion, would be the Bills. I think they're a very solid football team coming into the season. So I'm going to take the Bills on the road against the Jets. Next up at home against the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to give you guys a win. I think you guys will find a way to get a win here. I think that the Dolphins are going to be a very good team this year, potentially a playoff team. But I think going into that game, it's going to be November. It's going to be really cold out there in New York in November. So I'm going to take the Jets over the Dolphins. Next up on the road at the Houston Texans, that's a win. I think the Texans are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year with that stuff that they got going on with Deshaun Watson right now. So I'm going to take the Jets over the Texans. Next up at home against Philly, that's a win. I think the Jets are a better team than the Eagles. The Eagles are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. So I'm going to take the Eagles over the Jets. No, the Jets to beat the Eagles. Next up, at home against the Saints, that's a loss. I think Jameis Winston will play just well enough this week. Jameis has been good enough to beat the Jets in the past, so he'll be good enough with a more talented team than he had a couple of years ago down here in Tampa when he beat the Jets. So I will take the Saints to beat the Jets. Next up at Miami, Week 15 of the season, the Sunday before Christmas. It's going to be really hot down here, so I'm going to take the Dolphins to get a home win over the Jets. No problem here. I think the Dolphins will want revenge after you guys beating them back in New York back in November. Next up, on the road at home against the Jags. I think that's a win. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to go through some growth pains this year. He's going to be decent, but he's not going to be great. I'll be excited to watch him, but he's not going to win a lot of games. Next up, at home against the Bucs. That's another loss. I think this game's going to get ugly and get ugly quick. This game, we might start off a little slow because it's going to be a little bit cold in New York in the first week of January. But I think we'll get off to a slow start, but then we'll get it going. And Jeremy, if you want to make a bet with me for this game, I'll be happy to oblige on that one. Definitely, I'll be looking for that bag of gummy bears coming my way this year. Next up, on the road at Buffalo, that's a loss. I think the Bills are, like I said, are a better team than the Jets, and I think that game's at home. I had the Bills to have something to play for in that final week of the season. So I'm going to say the Jets win 5 or 6 games this year. Not a great season, but you guys have potential. I think Zach Wilson looks good. I saw him play against UCF last year in the bowl game, and he looked unbelievable. But a lot of the quarterbacks looked great against UCF's defense last year, so we'll see what happens with that. Next up, my buddy Phil Diaz, my boss of Smoothies over there in Winter Springs. His Giants are up the first week of the season at home against Denver. I think that's at home. Yes. Give me the Giants at home. I think that makes it even more of an easy pick. I'll take the Giants at home over the Broncos. Next up, on the road at Washington, week 2 of the season. Thursday Night Football, short week. These short week games are always tough. I always like to favor the home team in these games, so I'll take the Washington football team. I think Fitzpatrick will play just well enough. I like Fitzpatrick. I think he's going to do well. So I'm going to take the Washington football team to get a win over the Giants. Next up, week 3 of the season at home against Atlanta. I think that's a win. I think the Giants' defense is going to be a little bit too much here. I think they'll put some pressure on Matt Ryan and that offense to continue to put up points. I think that Giant defense is actually pretty good. So I'm going to take the Giants at home over the Falcons. Next up, on the road at New Orleans. I think that's a loss. I think James Winston will play well enough at home. Tough game, but I think the Saints will find a way to sneak one out here on the road at home against the Giants. Next up, at week 5 at Dallas. I think that's a loss. I think the Cowboys are going to be a very good team this year. If Dak can stay healthy, they're a potential team that I could see potentially going deep into the playoffs this year. I'd like what Dak Prescott did last year, averaging like 70 points in fantasy a week last year before he went down in the injury. Next up, at home against the LA Rams. I think that's a loss. I think the Rams are going to be a very good team this year. Probably my second best bet to make the Super Bowl out of the NFC this year. I think Matt Stafford's going to have a lot of confidence coming into this game. I think he's going to have a big, he's going to be really motivated to do really well this year. I think he needs to prove to people that it was just the Lions that were bad, not him, for the last 10 years of his career. Next up, at home against Carolina. I think that's a win. I think the Giants have beaten Sam Darnold almost every year of his career, and I think they'll continue to do that with a win at home against Carolina. Next up, on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a loss. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to play very well in this game. It's tough to win at Arrowhead. Yeah, it is. But somehow James Winston won at Arrowhead one time in his career. I can't believe how that happened. Next up, at home against the Raiders. Tough game, but I'm going to say they get a win here. I think Derek Carr is not a great quarterback. I think John Gruden needs to find a new quarterback out there in Las Vegas. If this game was in Vegas, I probably would have taken the Raiders. But because it's in New York in November, it should be in the 50s at this point in the season. I'm going to take the Giants at home over the Raiders. Next up, at home, on the road at Tampa. My buddy Phil Diaz has already given me a score prediction for this game. He's going 24-14 Giants. I think the Bucs are going to be motivated to get revenge for that loss that we had a couple of years ago at home. Jameis Winston actually played very well in that game. The problem that we had was we couldn't make our kicks that game. Yeah, that game was just missing kicks left and right all game long. If we would have actually had a good kicker, we would have won that game pretty easily. I'll take the Bucs at home to win a close game, but it's going to be. It was close last year. I think it'll be close again this year. I'll take the Bucs to get it done at home against the Giants. Next up, at home against Philly. I got that as a win. I think the Giants are a good team. Daniel Jones, I think, needs to step up this year if he wants to keep his spot in New York. So I'm going to take the Giants to get a home win over the Eagles. Next up, at home and on the road at Miami. And that's a loss. I think Tua will play just well enough this week. It's all going to come down to which quarterback makes the least amount of mistakes. And I think Tua is going to make the least amount of mistakes in this game. Both defenses are very good. I expect a low-scoring game. But I'm going to take the Dolphins at home over the Giants. Next up, at home against, on the road at the LA Chargers. For my buddy Kyle, I think that's a loss. I think Justin Herbert's going to play much better this year. I think the Chargers are a potential sleeper to make the playoffs this year. I think I like the way Justin Herbert looked last season. He was going toe-to-toe with Tom Brady for about 3 or 4 quarters last year. Played very well. Next up, at home against Dallas. I think you guys will split against Dallas. It's always tough to sweep a divisional opponent, especially when you're in the NFC least. So I'll take the Giants to get a home win over the Cowboys. Next up, on the road at Philly. This is the only team I see people sweeping in the NFC East this year. I'll take the Giants on the road at Philly. Jalen Hurts, I think, will be decent. He looked pretty good last night in preseason. But preseason games don't really matter. Next up, so I got the Giants beating the Eagles in Philly. Next up, on the road at Chicago. Again, it's all about which quarterback they want to go with this week. If they're already starting the rookie quarterback Justin Fields, I have this game as a loss. But if they're going with Andy Dalton this week, I have this game as a win for the Giants. I'm going to go with that. I actually think this is going to be a loss. I think they're going to go. I think Matt Nagy will be smart. They'll start Justin Fields by this point in the season. I'll take the Bears at home to get it done against the Giants in the first week of January. Next up, at home against the Washington football team. I'll take that as a win. I think the Giants finish the season off on the right note. And I think they'll get 6 or 7 wins this year. I think it'll be a solid year for the Giants. And that will do it for this episode of Scott's Weekend Sports Today, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be back next week. I think I'm doing the Chargers and the Packers next week for Kyle and Coach Peck. And I'll see you guys right back here next week on Scott's Weekend Sports right here on YouTube. See you later, guys.